Make up mind. Fight.
So, JoJo All-Star Battle R is out, and it's fun. Asterisk. Putting complaints about the game's netcode aside, All-Star Battle R is a fun, fan-servicey JoJo fighting game, which is really all I would have wanted from it, especially considering the context that it's a CyberConnect 2 and Bandai Namco game. For this video, I thought I'd go ahead and rank all of the sets of supers in the game, and put them on a tier list from A tier to D tier. I don't think there's any supers in this game that go below a D tier, and I think there's very, very few that'll go that low at all to begin with, because in general, this game's supers are really, really good. So, a few things to note, we'll be using this video here by this Japanese YouTuber that I'll link in the description to go over these supers, just to kind of save some time on me not having to load individual matches for all of them. This is a really good video. It shows all of the supers in full, you know, extends the ones that can be extended, shows alternate versions, stuff like that. And also, we'll be ranking the HHAs and GHAs, that is characters level 1s and level 3s, at the same time. They won't be separate on the tier list, and there won't be separate tiers for them. And the reason for this is twofold. One is that if we didn't, we'd have to make separate tier lists for the level 1s and the level 3s, which seems kind of pedantic. And also just because I think the characters who have really, really good level 1s in this game also have really good level 3s and vice versa. So there's really no point in separating them. That said, let's roll. So let's start out with the part 1 characters, beginning with Jonathan. So this is a really good baseline for what we're starting with. This super does a great job introducing people who might not be familiar with this game or even to JoJo to what they can expect from it, while not getting too crazy right off the bat. The HHA really isn't that impressive. It's pretty much just a big Hammond-infused punch, but it looks proper meaty. The fact that it's not that flashy really doesn't matter, considering that we are talking about Jonathan. The GHA is really, really nice. It introduces us pretty well to the big punch barrages that are going to come later on in this game. The voice acting, just him yelling about the beat of his blood and stuff like that is really, really good. In general, I believe the original All-Star Battle does have better voice deliveries than this game. I'm not going to say better voice acting in general, because a lot of the actors are still very, very talented and still giving it their all. I just think the deliveries and the direction in the original All-Star Battle is a little better. But for what it's worth, Jonathan brings it on this one. And overall, I think this is a great super. It really encompasses everything you'd expect from Jonathan, and I like it. We'll give this one a very comfortable A tier to start out with. Okay, so next up is Zeppeli, so let's see what he's got for us. So this one, I'm not as in love with as I am with Jonathan's. I think incorporating the different things Zeppeli actually did in the manga and anime is really well done here. The fact that his HHA is literally just the Sendo punch he did on the frog, and using the pinky hit at the beginning is really nice. My main problem with it is that it's really sedentary. This super, especially the level 3, is just a lot of, like, Zeppeli standing around and charging. It's a lot of preamble that ultimately just leads into a really big zoom punch, which is an attack he already has. I still think it's good. We'll definitely get worse supers in the game than this later on, but as is, I think this one gets a B tier. Next up is Speedwagon, who's obviously the character we've all seen online the most in this game, so we've all seen these supers a million times, but let that not distract us from what he's got for us. So these supers, once again, we've all seen them a million times. Everyone's fucking playing this character online. But for what it's worth, they're still really good. The level 1 and the level 3 both come together to incorporate pretty much everything Speedwagon did in actual combat in part 1, which makes sense considering that he really only ever properly fought once and it was very, very brief. Bringing in Tattoo and Kenpo for the combo moves is a really good choice. And I especially love the sound design on the level 3. The fact that you can very audibly hear it like hitting bone is really brutal and really good sounding just for the impact and the meatiness of the attack. I like that they chose to give this one specifically the like little unique facial animations on every character. It absolutely did not need it, and it just looks like they're kind of grabbing the character's model and just shaking them around a little bit with a static facial expression on it. It looks a little jank, but I kind of love it for that. It really fits the Speedwagon aesthetic. The fact that this is also one of the most damaging supers in the game is absolutely hilarious. So I think overall, Speedwagon gets a very, very comfortable A tier. Next up is Dio, who's another character everyone is playing online in this game. Let's see what he's got. So this fucking rules. Giving him the laser eyes as his level 1 is an inspired choice. They obviously weren't going to give him a full screen instant projectile on his normal moveset. This isn't Marvel vs. Capcom, to be honest. It's just really good and really well implemented into his moveset. This video doesn't show it, but there's also unique interaction where if he kills Jonathan with it, Jonathan says Arina's name before he goes down. It's a nice little touch, the kind of thing this game really excels at. The level 3 is interesting because it really is just Dio beating the hell out of the enemy before, you know, freezing them and shattering them, which is obviously what he did to Dyer in the anime, but interesting because it's not based on any one specific combo he did, just a lot of little moves leading into a reference to a specific moment, but I still think it's absolutely exceptional. Dio's voice actor, his name escapes me right now and I apologize, but he hasn't lost his touch for voicing this character at all, and he's been voicing him for like well over a decade. He's still bringing it just as well as he always had. The voice acting on this one just is absolutely going in. His yelling, his laugh is absolutely exceptional. I'd say this is probably our first S tier for the video. Okay, we're going into the part 2 characters now, starting with Joseph. So this is probably going to make a lot of people really angry. I don't love Joseph supers in this game, and I think it's to absolutely no fault of the developers or designers. In the actual context of part 2 as a story or a manga or an anime, Joseph doesn't come to blows with people a lot, in that like he obviously fights people, but a lot of his fights are based on like trickery and outsmarting them and outwitting them to like get the upper hand. He's not like punch barraging them in the way that other characters in the JoJo series do. So this leads to some really not impactful feeling supers. They're great references. I absolutely think like incorporating the Tommy gun he used on Strayzo and the Clacker Volley is really, really smart, but I just don't love them as much as I love some other supers in the game. They're not as impactful, I feel. The Clacker Volley specifically, I love the Tommy gun plenty, but the Clacker Volley is really weirdly animated. At the beginning of the animation, when he first pulls out the clackers, he swings them at the enemy at an angle that makes it appear as though they won't impact them in any significant way at all, and then the camera immediately cuts and he's swinging them from a completely different angle. It just doesn't look that great or like translate that great to motion. It's a cool still frame, but in motion it just doesn't look as good as it probably could have. This really sucks to say, but I feel like Joseph might get our first C tier for this video. Hey, post-recording editing note here. I decided to move Joseph up to B tier since some of the other animations we'll put in C tier later in the game are much, much worse than his, and he really, really doesn't deserve to be in C tier. So yeah, Joseph is a B tier now. Joseph might not have impressed me too much, but let's see what Caesar can do. So these things are just excellent. Caesar's a character who had his supers like very, very clearly like written out for him in the manga. It was probably very easy for them to decide on what these were going to be without need for too much augmentation or adaptation. The bubble barriers, the level 1 works really, really good. It is a little weird how he traps the opponent in it and then it just pops, but it still looks really nice and still feels impactful. The bubble cutter is really well done. This is an elaborate animation. They have several different textures and particle effects coming from all different angles on this thing. The way the enemy just explodes at the end from the heat is really, really cool. This is definitely an A tier. Caesar's a character who I don't think about that often in retrospect when I think about part 2. I think about his death and like, you know, his role in the story, but I don't think too much about his actual character that often. But I always forget how much cool stuff he actually was doing in part 2 and that the bubbles were a big part of that. Okay, we're going into the Pillar Men now, and I'm not gonna lie, I don't love any of these sets of supers too terribly much, but let's see which one ends up being my favorite. So Wamu is in an interesting position in that his supers feel like they're from a different fighting game. In that All-Star Battle R is very much like very referential to JoJo. The animations are really elaborate recreations of scenes from the anime. And while he definitely used these two abilities in the anime and the manga, these are just him using like two attacks that he has. Like these animations feel like they'd be more at place in something like Dragon Ball FighterZ or Marvel vs. Capcom, incorporated more into the actual gameplay rather than being these really elaborate cutscenes, feeling once again really out of place in comparison to the rest of the supers in this game. They're both really nice looking and really meaty, but they're just not as elaborate or cinematic as a lot of the other supers in this game. And I think because of that, you know, I love Wamu as a character. He's probably my favorite Pillar Man. He gets our first and one of our only D tiers in this video. Next up is Esadisi, who is another character who pretty much had his entire lineup of supers pretty much picked out for him right from the manga, so let's see what he's got. So these ones are actually really nice. These are probably my favorite supers that any of the Pillar Men have in the game. The first one has a great amount of preamble and setup with that heartbeat sound effect going into the actual move. And the fact that the move itself is just the kick that he did to either Messina or Loggins, I can't remember which one to kill them, is a nice reference adapted really well to gameplay. The level 3 is really brutal. Like what he's actually doing to you in this attack is super fucked up. The fact that he didn't actually get this move off in the proper story and that we see what it would look like if he actually did in the game is really neat. It's just a really crazy, like, really wild concept for an attack. I'm hovering between A and B tier. You know what? He gets an A tier. Yeah, SADC gets an A tier. Alright, lastly for part 2 is Kars, the main villain of the part, and he's gonna pose a little bit of a problem here in a second, but we'll get to that when we get to it. So, like I said, Kars is going to pose a little bit of a problem, and that he has our first install super in this video. You know, a super that transforms him into another state, that gives him new moves and everything. These things are interesting in All-Star Battle R in that they are very easy to interrupt, but if they're not, have absolutely huge effects on the matches that they occur in. Kars is really helped by his really elaborate animation going into it, and just how much his moveset changes after he gets it off. He becomes basically like a totally different character. And his level 1 is really cool too. It's like basically just one big hit, but it's got a really nice flourish at the beginning and end. I'd say Kars, I am hovering between B and A tier for him. I think he gets an A tier. I'm not in love with the install super just because they're not my favorite types of supers in fighting games in general, and due to how easy they are to interrupt in this game specifically. But when you get this thing off, you really like it affects the match. Okay, we're up to the part 3 characters, which means we're also in the stand zone, starting with Jotaro. So let's see how our introduction to stands in this game works. So Jotaro is in a weird position. because what did this guy do in the Stardust Crusaders anime and manga before he got his time stop? He punched people. What did he do after he got his time stop? He punched people. He has punches in his normal moveset. He has punches in his throws. He has punches for both of his supers. He just punches throughout his entire moveset. And this is kind of the beginning of a problem I have with some of this game's supers, where their level 3s and level 1s are just elaborate, longer versions of things that they do in normal gameplay that do more damage. It's a little lame, but I think it works a little bit better for Jotaro, considering that punching people is really all that he did in terms of combat in Stardust Crusaders. This is a really difficult one to place. The level 1 is obviously neat in that it's like fully controllable and that you can extend it by mashing. I think that's really neat. If you don't mash, then you basically do like no damage to this thing and get like 2 hits in. The level 3 is also cool that it incorporates time stop. The fact that part 3 Jotaro gets a time stop super but part 4 Jotaro doesn't is a decision that will always baffle me. But overall, once again, Jotaro's kind of difficult to place. I think just due to the fact that both of his supers are him doing things he does in his moveset already, he can't go any higher than B tier. And it's a shame because I don't know what else they would have done with him. I don't know, it's weird. Next up is Kakyoin, who is a character I think they did really good in terms of his supers in this game, so let's see. Kakyoin supers are really nice. Rather than Jotaro's type of thing where he just does things he does in normal gameplay, this adapts 2 moves he used in the anime at different points. One of them he didn't actually get off, but that's neither here nor there. The level 1 being from the possession he fights in his introductory fight against Jotaro is a really smart inclusion. Just Hierophant Green going inside of the enemy and beating the hell out of him is a neat idea. And the level 3, actually getting to see the 50-meter radius Emerald Splash like go off and have him actually use it is neat. It reminds me a lot of SADC's super, though I think this one is considerably less brutal. I don't think this would have killed Dio even if he did get it off in the actual story, but it still looks really nice as an animation, just the opponent bouncing around and then leading into that close range shotgun blast of emeralds. It's cool. I also love getting to hear these voice clips voiced by an actually good Kakyoin voice actor who suits the character. No shade against the actor in the original game, I just didn't think his voice really suited Kakyoin. Overall, I'd say these get an A tier. Next up is Polnareff, who's a character who I never really loved in the Part 3 anime and story, but let's see how his supers hold up. Polnareff is in an interesting position because he didn't do a lot of really flashy stuff in Part 3. For a character who pretty much hijacked the entire story and made it Polnareff's bizarre adventure, he doesn't do a lot of, like, really neat stuff. It's just him, you know, sword fighting people and hitting them with his stand sword. The level 1 being an install is interesting. I can't think of too many other characters in this game who have an install super as their level 1. It's not too visually flashy, but it does affect gameplay pretty significantly. The level 3, I'm not super in love with. It's just kind of another, like, combo leading into a big hit, which is what a lot of characters' supers in this game are. Though I do think it's buoyed pretty hard by the shot of the after images floating behind Polnareff. Overall, it might just be my bias and him not being my favorite character in the story, but I think Polnareff gets a C tier. Okay, next up is Avdol, who's a character I do like much more than Polnareff, so let's see what he's got. So, Avdol's supers are neat. They're not spectacular, but I'd say they're neat. His level 1 is actually really slick. It's really, really fast, so it's hard to read what he's actually doing. But Magician's Red, like, really goes in on the enemy here with physical attacks, which isn't something I think you'd really associate with Avdol. And the flourish at the end with the Yes I Am is a really, really great reference. His level 3 is a little interesting because, you know, Crossfire Hurricane Special is Avdol's, like, big ultimate attack in the story. But in this actual animation, he's just kind of throwing a bunch of projectiles at the enemy and lifting him in the air with it, and then just putting a big fire ankh in front of him that blows up. It doesn't even look like it shoots out or anything, it just looks like it manifests in front of him and then explodes. It doesn't read as well as I think it probably could have for an animation like this, but I don't think it's bad by any stretch, and I think Avdol gets a B tier. Okay, so I'm going to address the elephant in the room here and say I'm not going to be critiquing the voice acting on this animation at all. Old Joseph's voice actor in Japan was an incredibly seasoned and storied voice actor with a lot of history in the industry. May he rest in peace, and I think all of his performances as Old Joseph were exemplary. That said, let's get on to the actual animation. I'm not gonna lie here, I think Old Joseph might truly have one of the worst HHAs in the entire game. It's not a reference to any specific moment from the anime, it's a counter super, and it just leads into one really big hit that doesn't have enough preamble or flourish or startup to really look cool or stylish. With less elaborate camera work, this thing looks like it could have been a normal move. His level 3 though is much cooler. When he picks them up with Hermit Purple and really throws them, he's putting his weight behind it. You can really feel how heavy the opponent is for him. This move has a great sense of startup and impact, and pulling it all together with a big Hamon-infused punch is absolutely stellar. I think if we were just judging the HHA, this would easily be a D tier, but I think Old Joseph manages to scrape out a C tier due to his really stellar level 3. On to Iggy, the first playable animal in this game. So Iggy's level 1 fucking rules. I'm a sucker for these pile driver suplex type wrestling moves, and the fact that he delivers this with the Fool specifically, and that you're such garbage to this literal wild stray alley dog that he doesn't even bother to stay awake while he uses it, is so cool and so in character for Iggy. I like his level 3 a little bit less. I think it's a really busy animation that's hard to keep track of what's actually going on in it, but I do think the ending is really nice with him biting the opponent's nose like he did to Pet Shop, and the fact that it changes to a much more crude animation if he's in his alternate costume is neat. Overall, I'd say Iggy gets a B tier. Great, we're officially through the Crusaders, and now we can get to part 3's equally large cast of villains who are playable in this game, starting with Mariah. So Mariah had fucking work put into her in this game. This is one of the characters people are most angry as in the game in general, especially over a part 8 character, but for what it's worth, they did work on her. Her level 1's obviously hilarious. This is a reference to a very famous moment from the anime that appears in all sorts of out-of-context JoJo compilations. You know, this is the one that if you were watching these supers without any context of what she's doing, you would have absolutely no idea what it actually was and you would totally misinterpret it, and I kind of love it for that. Her level 3 is so complex. This thing has so many moving parts into so many individual sections, but it doesn't feel like inconsistent or random or non-flowing in any way. It flows really well from one part to another, and it incorporates pretty much everything she did during her fight against Joseph and Avdol into one attack. She just really fucking beats the hell out of you in this animation. The fact that the way she died in the anime is incorporated into the ending of the attack, and of course the Ojo laugh is all around really nice. This is really weird to say, but I think Mariah might get an S tier. This character had work put into her. Next up is Hall Horse, the Forgotten Crusader. Let's see what he's got. So Whole Horse's supers are cool. The level 1, it's not really that flashy, but it's absolutely something he should be capable of doing in the context of the actual story. Just shooting a single bullet and having it run all over the enemy and hit them at multiple different points and everything. It's cool. It's not anything he did in the actual story, but it is something he should be capable of doing, so I'm glad they represented it in the game. His level 3 is one of the more brutal in the game, just on a base foundational level. This is a markedly, like, not anime-ish or cartoony animation. Like, obviously the Hanged Man shows up and you blast the bottle and everything, which is really cool, but it's pretty creepy, borderline spooky, and he's not, like, really doing anything that flashy. He stabs you and then shoots you in the head. Like, that's all this animation is. And you know, All-Star Battle uses this fake, like, black blood substitute in the place of anywhere that blood would appear in the game to kind of get around potential age rating issues. And this is one of the animations where it's the least subtle about it. Like, you are just getting stabbed and shot in the head in this animation. You can tell that that black stuff is definitely blood. Overall, I'd say Whole Horse gets an A tier. Next up is Pet Shop, the character who inarguably deserves to be in this game the least. I do not love Pet Shop supers. His level 1's alright, it's very clearly a reference to the attack he used to kill the Cairo informant that the Crusaders hire. That's all fine and good, but his level 3 is like the inverse of what Mariah's is. Whereas I said Mariah's flows really well and incorporates a lot of the things she did in the individual attacks in the anime. This one is just Pet Shop throwing things out. Like, it's just 3 or 4 different individual animations that are just kind of strung together in a really loose, like, really poorly flowing way. I think Pet Shop might get a D tier, guys. I'm sorry. Next up is Vanilla Ice, top 6 Void Users alumni. Let's see what he's got. Vanilla Ice is interesting because in the context of the actual story, you would not survive either of these attacks for more than half a second. Like, you would be dead instantly if you got hit by either of these. It's completely turned to vapor. For game balance, they obviously can't do that. I'm not in love with his level 1. It feels almost like a throw because of how, like, quick and snappy it is. Like, this is the same way throws in this game are animated. I would honestly say his throw would be a better level 1 animation than this. His level 3 is neat. I love how it recreates the shot from the anime of him closing in on Polnareff. It's really cool. The sound design on Cream as it closes in is actually really fucking scary. I think Cream is unironically a pretty scary stand in the series in general. The moment where it just appears behind Avdol is unironically really terrifying, and I think it's captured really well here. This is unfortunately another super where it's just him doing stuff he does during normal gameplay with a more elaborate animation and more damage, and in some cases not even more damage, but I do think it's all around pretty cool. I think I'll give Vanilla Ice a B tier. And finally, we're up to the main character of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Dio. God damn. So I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a history lesson. If you became a fan of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure after the anime started, if you became a fan of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure in the 2010s at all, after the anime, you probably wouldn't know this, but before modern JoJo memes, before jokes about over-muscled characters and characters punching really fast, even before those old Zoot Suit memes that didn't represent JoJo at all that people still associated with it for some reason, what JoJo memes were on the mainstream internet was Dio. Specifically the Road Roller and the knives. Like, those are the 2 pieces of imagery people associated with JoJo's Bizarre Adventure on the Western mainstream internet. And just for the icon status. This is, prior to the anime airing, this was the most famous thing in JoJo, was Dio hitting you with the Road Roller. These have to get an S tier on principle, but they're also just so incredible. They go so hard. These things had work put into them. I just fucking love these supers, man. These things are an S+ tier. They're incredible. And if you thought my gushing was gonna stop there, don't worry, because we're on to part 4, which is my favorite part of the anime, starting with Josuke. These supers are good. I'm not too in love with this base level 1 since it is just a punch barrage, but the fact that they incorporated the shard of glass that he used against Kira in their final fight is a really neat touch that didn't need to be included, they just went for anyways. I can appreciate that extra work. His level 3 is fun in that it's not too visually flashy, but if you're a fan of JoJo at all, you know exactly what he's doing to you here, and it's just so well done. Josuke healing someone so that he can beat the hell out of them without feeling bad is a really staple part of his character, even if it's something he only actually did once in the proper anime. It's just such a good animation. The fact that your health bar actually goes back up, even though it's totally cosmetic, your health value doesn't actually increase, it's just visual, is really cool. I want to give these an S tier, but due to the fact that the level 1 is a little plain and the level 3 isn't that flashy, I think they've got to get an A tier instead. We love you, Okuyasu. Let's see what you got for us. So Okuyasu is another character you would absolutely not survive being on the receiving end of his supers for more than like half a second. Just like Vanilla Ice, if you get hit by either of these, you're fucking vapor in like an instant. But I think in terms of gameplay, the first one's really, really fun. It's not that visually flashy, but if you've been hit by this thing in game, you know how bad it hurts and how badly it messes you up. This thing is unblockable. It hits you on the ground. It's just insanely strong if you don't sidestep it. His level 3 is kind of neat. It's just him scraping away at you a lot, which is something he did with the hand only once in the anime because he doesn't really like to hurt anyone. But it's really cool to see him actually use it in a way that everyone was screaming at him to in the context of the actual story. And him getting hit by the flower pot at the end is a funny touch. I love how it can't actually kill you, how if this animation connects, then both players will be on the ground long enough for the health to come back before either one can get up. It's fun. Overall, I'd say Okuyasu gets a B tier. They're nothing terribly impressive, but nothing bad at all either. Next up is Kishibe Rohan, who is, fun fact, my favorite anime character of all time. Not just JoJo. I fucking love this guy. Let's see his supers. So the fact that Rohan's in this game at all is kind of a miracle, considering that he never actually fought in Part 4. Like, he fought, but he didn't come to blows with anyone. He didn't, like, square up with anyone in a life-or-death situation, except maybe his fight with Josuke, which wasn't even really a fight. He was just trying to outwit them. I think his supers are nice. The first one being him ripping a page out of you is nice, and the second one being him turning you into a book and writing in you is a good escalation of that. I will say, I hate the voice acting on the first one, the level 1 in this game. In the original All-Star Battle, he sounded so much more confident and cocky and mocking you. In this game, it just sounds like someone farted nearby and he thought it was really funny. These moves also have a much bigger effect in gameplay than their animations would lead you to believe. I believe the level 3 completely locks you out of acting for like 5 ticks of the in-game counter, which would really mess you up if you were fighting a character that wasn't Rohan. Overall, while he is my favorite character, I'm not in love with these supers. I think they're fine. Adapting Rohan's abilities to a fighting game is an intrinsically uphill battle they had to fight, and I think they delivered well enough. He's got a B tier. Next up is Koichi, the main character of Part 4. So the first one is absolutely nothing special. It's a pretty generic stand rush of him descending to stand out to attack the enemy. The level 3, though, is significantly better. I love that it incorporates all 3 forms of echoes. I think there's only one moment in the anime or the manga that confirms he can still use all 3 forms after evolving them. So the fact that they incorporated that into his moveset at all is pretty neat. And the opponent just plummeting to the ground after being hit by Echo's 3 freeze is a really nice touch. Them just being buried in the ground is really neat. These get, I'd say, I know we've been given a lot of these out recently, but I'd say this one also gets a B tier. Onwards to Yukiko, who's a character I was very excited for in this game that I'm not 100% a fan of how they adapted. Let's see. So I'll be honest, the level 1 is absolutely terrible. This is one of my least favorite level 1s in the game. I know it's a reference to the scene from her fight against Koichi where she's just throwing stuff at him, but it's just not that creative and not that interesting, and I think this character could be given more. Have her, like, fill the entire arena with hair or something like she did during the fight against Koichi, instead of just giving her throwing an object. You could give any character in this game with a strength stand them throwing something. This is really lame. Her level 3 is significantly better. I do like how they adapted it from Eyes of Heaven, that it's not just her slamming the opponent around. Like, she looks and sounds fucking angry, and it really feels like she's just going berserk and throwing everything she has at you. It's cool. I like it. Overall, I'd say the level 3 is good, but not impressive enough to really buoy the really lackluster level 1. So I'd say Yukiko gets a C tier. Remember when I said Pet Shop was the character who deserved to be in this game the least? Well, I forgot about Part 4 Jotaro. Talk about lame. He's just Part 3 Jotaro. He has the same stuff. He has a time stop, he has a punch super, and he has another punch super. They didn't do enough with Part 4 Jotaro as a unique character to justify his place in this game. If my problem with Part 3 Jotaro was that his moves weren't unique enough, Part 4 Jotaro has the problem that his moves are both not unique enough and derivative of an already not unique character. This is a D tier. If we had one, this would be an F tier, man. Akira Otoishi, the original main villain of Part 4 before he gets jobbed out. Let's see what he's got. Okay, so I don't love this character at all, but I think these supers are excellent. One thing I love about them is how much they seem to focus on putting the spotlight on Otoishi rather than Red Hot Chili Pepper, which I feel is exactly what he would have wanted and is totally what this character's MO is. That he's being this excellent savant guitarist that wants eyes on him while also doing evil, wicked things with the stand in the background is really, really neat. The level 1 and the level 3 are honestly pretty similar. It's just Red Hot Chili Pepper beating the hell out of the enemy while he shreds on his guitar, but just the presentation of them individually, like the sounds of the guitar, he's just wailing away at that thing. And it's not this crazy elaborate like full metal performance, it's just him shredding on his guitar. It's the exact right amount of ridiculous, and the O-face at the end is obviously really nice. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I think Otoishi gets an A tier. Shigechi, the most unfortunate character in anime history. Let's see what he's got for us. Shigechi's level 1 fucking sucks. I haven't really mentioned it in this video before this, but a lot of the characters who I've said have lackluster level 1s in this game actually were DLC in the original game. Characters like Vanilla Ice, Old Joseph, Shigechi now. I feel like the design team of the original game didn't have a lot of time to flesh out really elaborate HHAs for a lot of the DLC characters, which I hope doesn't carry over to this game, but luckily Shigechi's level 3 is more than enough to buoy his incredibly bad level 1. This is a really brutal animation. I know there's a line in the manga where Josuke mentions that he doesn't think anyone could beat Shigechi in a one-on-one fight fairly, and this kind of demonstrates why. This is borderline like phobia of bugs stuff, where they're just getting all over you, really shredding at you on your leg and your chest and your eyes. Just like people who are afraid of bugs would hate this animation, and I think it's just the right amount of brutal while also being silly enough in its presentation to not come off as too oppressive. Overall, I think Shigechi's level 3 is really cool. He gets a B tier. Alright, Yoshikage Kira. Now, I will be completely honest with you up front. Aside from Dio, due to the icon status, this is my favorite set of supers in the entire game. I think these things are stellar. Let's watch. Oh my god, I love these supers, man. These are excellent. These are, like, perfect. The level 1 isn't based on any specific thing he did in the anime, but it is just so slick, so visceral, so stylish. He just bounces you up, boom, 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 over and over again with the explosions, leading to one big final explosion. It is so slick, it is so clean. And the fact that the explosions for Kira specifically in this game are rendered with this really nice pink and purple texture just makes them look so unique. And his level 3 is just insane. This thing has so many complex visual effects on it and camera angles. Just the sound effect of Sheer Heart Attack plowing into the enemy sounds so visceral. The fade from black after Sheer Heart Attack explodes is just so nice. The fact that you're so garbage to this dude that he can't even look at you while he blows you up, it's just exceptional. So good. It's also worth mentioning that Sheer Heart Attack is absolutely broken in gameplay. If you don't know you have to jump over this thing at a very specific time and you either try to sidestep it or block it, you are very likely losing the round. I love these supers. These are an S tier for sure. And for our last Part 4 character, let's go on to Kosaku Kawajiri, a completely different character that we haven't seen yet. So there's a strong argument to be made for these being the best supers in the game. I'm personally partial to Dio and normal Kira more, but these are really good. The level 1 is hampered a little bit by it being a counter super, but it's not too big a deal. Once again, counter supers are better in this game than they are in most other fighting games, and just the animation of him really like doing the math in his head, them putting the actual mental math he's doing on the screen is really neat, and that just slingshot of the bomb into them is so good. And the level 3, the bites the dust, is simply incredible. It's so elaborately animated, has so many moving parts. The voice acting is excellent. The fact that they got Haihato in there in the game at all is good. And this is just one of those moves in this game, kind of like Giorno's level 3 or Kira's soon to be level 3 in his DLC version, that just adds so many asterisks to things in this game with like how other moves interact with it and just how many different ways it interacts with different things in the game. This is a level 3 that had work put into it. Both Kiras get an S tier. Okay, so funny story, I'm actually recording this part of the video over a week after the previous part due to some unforeseen circumstances, so if my audio sounds any different or my positioning sounds any different, you know why. Anyway, let's get back in with Giorno.
Gold experienceの能力。鋭い痛みをゆっくり味わえ。矢のハマーを。ゴールドエクスペリエンスレクイエム。あとはまた滅びずにいられるのか。
Okay, so Gold Experience, Requiem, and Giorno. This is another difficult one to rank due to it being an install super and it just being insanely hard to get off in gameplay. But on a purely fan service level, like, they weren't going to give Giorno anything other than GER for a super in this game. The level 1, the HHA, is absolutely incredible. I love that they give this thing unique animations for every character in the game. Some of them have references to their individual parts in them. It's just really, really cool. I know that some people were disappointed that he didn't get a reference to the 7-page Muda in his moveset, but really, where were they going to fit it in? It wasn't going to be his HHA, and his GHA was obviously going to be Gold Experience Requiem. So overall, I think Giorno gets an S tier just for fan service and presentation alone. Next up is Bruno Bucciarati, who is my second favorite JoJo character behind Rohan, so let's see what he's got.
Sticky fingers! Hey!
God, these are good supers. I know I said earlier that Rohan's my favorite JoJo character, but I don't love his supers in this game. Bruno just totally delivers on all fronts. The HHA isn't really a clear reference to anything he did in the manga or anime, but it's just so clean. The fact that he pile drives you into the ground and then just cleanly rolls away looks really, really nice. Just such a smooth, clean animation. And the GHA is, of course, what else were they going to give him? The Airy combo he did on Pesci is obviously going to be a super in this game, and it's just so well animated. The way he pulls you in, the way he slinks out to watch you get pummeled, it's just so good. The only thing I think this thing is missing is a final Airy, like a final yell on the stand cry to really finish it off, but other than that, it's absolutely perfect. These get another S tier. Next up is the Funny 4 Meme Man. Let's see what he's got. So this is another one where I feel like the voice acting compared to the original really hurts it. This is kind of a problem with a lot of the Part 5 characters. I'll talk about it with Fugo in a second, and I guess Narancia too. But a lot of the new Part 5 voice actors just don't bring it in the way that the original voice actors in the original All-Star Battle did. Specifically here on Sex Pistols, it just sounds kind of like lackadaisical, like you're really phoning it in. Other than that, this is a really nice set of moves. The HHA just being a big split bullet, like cone shot, is really, really neat. Satisfying to land if you get all of them connected. And the GHA is pretty much just another example of him doing something he already does in the game with a longer animation. It's just a cutscene of the Sex Pistols getting the bullet to the enemy, but it's really well animated. The shot of Mista dropping the bullets out of his hat and the shot of the pistols riding the bullet is really, really cool. Overall, I'd say Mista gets a B tier. Next up is Narancia, who is a character I don't have a lot to say about. Let's go. Okay, so Narancia's kind of a mixed bag for me. I like his HHA basically just being him carpet bombing the enemy, and his GHA is effectively just a punch barrage, but with bullets instead of punches. I like the way the enemy is carried into the air and the really dramatic shots of the bomb at the end. That said, the All-Star Battle R voice acting on this super is so bad. And it's not to discredit the voice actor because they are very talented. It's too deep for Narancia. His whole shtick is that he's meant to be young and androgynous compared to the other members of the gang. He's meant to be a more bright-eyed, starry-eyed, younger gangster with a more idealized vision of the mob world. And I know he's technically older than Giorno, but you get what I mean. And he just sounds like a man in this voice acting. Like, he doesn't sound childish or bright-eyed in any way. It just sounds like he's just... the voice actor doesn't sound like he's putting on a voice, basically. But that said, I'm not going to knock it too hard for voice acting, so I'd say this will get a B tier. Next up is Fugo, who's one of my favorite characters in the game, just for the fact that they were able to make a moveset for him out of effectively one fight. Let's see what he's got.
済ませた。それにかける。こんな目をしていたのか。
So Fugo's kind of difficult to rank because his HHA is actually one of the worst in the game. I know he didn't do a whole lot in the original Part 5 story, so they didn't have a lot to work with, but it's literally just a punch barrage. It looks like it could be a normal move if it was a little shorter. It's just not that impressive. His GHA, though, is incredible. This is one that they obviously had to work a lot with because if you were to use this in the context of the actual series, the enemy would be dead in seconds. But the way they worked around it with, you know, the grayscale filter so the visuals don't get too graphic, that they don't have to animate the characters individually melting, it's a good touch. It's a very visceral, borderline scary super, which I think makes sense considering that Purple Haze is probably one of the scarier stands in the series. I will say, again, the voice acting on this thing is bad in All-Star Battle R. In the original version of All-Star Battle, Purple Haze sounded like a beast going crazy on you, just unleashing the full brunt of its anger. In this game, it sounds really lackadaisical, like he just doesn't want to be here, pretty much. But I will say, the fact that they maintain the Purple Haze feedback reference is very, very cool. Considering that it was cut out in Eyes of Heaven, I fully expected them to remove it from this game, so I'm glad it's still here. I really want to give him an S tier just due to the quality of that GHA, but considering the lackluster voice acting and the very underwhelming HHA, I'd say Fugo slots into A tier. Next is Trish, who's similar to Fugo. They had not a lot to work with, but they made a full moveset out of. So I kind of love these. Trish is a character I've never had much affection for. I think in the context of Part 5 story, she's kind of useless and could just be replaced with an important MacGuffin they need to transfer rather than an actual person. But for what they had to work with in All-Star Battle R, they made her work. Her level 1 having a special input version with a special flourish at the end is really neat, and I like that it's a reference to the pole she used to fight Notorious Big. And the level 3 is just a simple punch barrage, but the fact that they incorporate both her ability to make the ground beneath her soft and her famous stand cry being one of the only ones that references the music that her stand is named after, plus that little flourish at the end, it's clear they wanted to make the most out of the very little material they had to work with, and I respect that. I don't think she gets an A tier just due to the simplicity of it all, but Trish can definitely get a very comfortable B tier. Next up are the characters in this game with the absolute most YouTube footage of them being newcomers Prosciutto and Pesci. Let's see. So I want to say, I love how Prosciutto is characterized in these supers. In the actual fight in the story, he's presented as being very in control and very cool-headed the whole time, and they translate that perfectly to these supers. His HHA is really, really simple. It's literally just him picking up the enemy by the face, but it's so brutal and so heavy feeling and just so oppressive. It's brutal, and I love it. This might be one of my favorite HHAs in the game. It's so methodical and deadly feeling. It's just cool. His level 3, I'm honestly not in love with the Pesci parts. It's just the opponent hanging in the air and getting the shit beaten out of them by the fishing hook. But by the time Pesci actually throws the enemy to Prosciutto and you see him calmly standing there waiting for them to arrive, he delivers a simple punch and then very calmly and stoically just puts 3 bullets in their head. It's so good. This is another super where the fact that they use that fake black blood is very unambiguous. Like, it's nothing else. He's just shooting you in the head. It's really neat. I honestly love these supers. I think Pesci and Prosciutto were characters that had potential to be a kind of why did you include these characters, but I definitely think they made the most of their inclusion with these supers, and these will easily slot into S tier. Damn, there's a lot of fucking Part 5 characters in this game, and none of them are Abakio or Risotto Nero.
熱語はデニスって英語で読むんだよ。なめてんのか。イタリア語で読めつきさ。歌よこけにしやがってボケが。
So Gyatso is clearly a character they had to workshop a little bit. His level 1 is one of very, very few, I would say, purely gameplay level 1s in the game. There's absolutely nothing cinematic to it. It's basically an install super, kind of like Virgil's sword from Marvel vs. Capcom 3. It's good in gameplay, but not that flashy in terms of the animation. The level 3 is one of the more interesting ones, not only because it just doesn't connect sometimes when it should in gameplay, but also because it's not really adapting anything he did to hurt the main characters in the story. It's adapting the scene of him punching the car, which is definitely a neat choice, a good use of resources from the actual fight. I love how long they hang on the shot of him just pondering people mispronouncing words, and just that sudden shift from him looking ponderous to angry before he starts beating the hell out of them. Honestly, my only complaint with this thing might be that it's a little long overall. Even though I like them hanging on the shot of him pondering things, the actual super itself is incredibly lengthy, considering that it's just him punching you a whole bunch. All in all, I'd say Gyatso, I'm hovering between B and A tier, but I think for the gameplay applications and the creativeness of his GHA, I'll go with A tier. Okay, we're on to the uncontested best character in the original All-Star Battle. Let's see what he's got for us. So you know how I've said a few times that counter supers are better in this game than they are in most other fighting games? Well, that's because of Diavolo. His supers are counter supers through and through, both his level 1 and his level 3, and it doesn't stop him from being the best character in the game. His level 1 is again another gameplay super. It doesn't really impact anything cinematically, but holy hell is this thing strong in gameplay. If he gets this thing off while you have a lead on him, it pretty much allows him to even the odds and take over the health lead without you being able to do anything about it. He can just dodge all of your attacks and there's nothing you can do about it. His level 3 is a much more standard counter super fare, but it does a truckload of damage. I'm not sure if it still is, but I know in the original All-Star Battle, this was the most damaging super in the game, and it's just insanely fucking strong. If you trip up for a moment fighting Diavolo, you are dead, and I think a lot of that has to do with his supers. Don't know if I'd give him an S tier just for the overall lack of real cinematic presence on the HHA. Nah, you know what, he is an S tier. For supers that affect gameplay this much, and also the very cinematic nature of his GHA, I'd give him an S tier. Okay, we're on to the Part 6 characters, of which Weather Report is not present for spoilers. Let's start with Jolene. Okay, so we obviously know these supers like the back of our hands. These things were all over the game's press going into its release due to Part 6 being the current anime part. Honestly, not horribly impressed by them, but I also don't know what else they would give Jolene considering the nature of her abilities and also what she actually did in the story. The level 1 being a clear-cut reference is very cool, even if they did change that fight in the anime, and the level 3 is just her straight up using Stone Free's ability. It's cool. I'd say Jolene gets a comfortable B tier. I would put her in A tier, but they're just not that flashy to me, honestly. I don't know, it's weird. Next up is Hermes, who's one of my favorite Joe bros. Let's see what she's rocking in this game. Okay, Hermes I like a little bit more than Jolene. Her level 1 is a counter super, but it's a nice usage of Kiss's abilities, and her just pummeling the enemy at the end is really satisfying, especially when you remember that Kiss is canonically one of the strongest physical stands in the series, apparently. Her level 3 is also really, the whole like Koremu, Koremu, Koremu yelling she does is really, really good. I think it sounds a little bit better in the original All-Star Battle, but it still sounds great in this game, and this super is immensely satisfying if you get the kill with it. Just the two halves of the opponent's head snapping back together for the kill. Feels really, really good. I'd say Hermes gets an A tier. Next up is Narc Anastasia. Just kidding, it's fucking Anasui. Let's see what he's got. I love Anasui supers in this game because they feel very, very much like the first supers in the game that if you were a non-JoJo fan, you would have absolutely no idea what the fuck this guy is doing to you. Like every other super in the game, you can kind of reasonably put things together from context in the animation, but if you're not familiar with Diver Down's abilities and what it's actually doing here, you have no fucking idea what's happening. That said, I think these supers are really, really good. I think they use Diver Down's abilities really succinctly and well. The shot of it beating the hell out of the enemy from the inside and then its foot rocketing out for a big kick looks really nice. Honestly, he's a character I'm not crazy about, but I'll give him an A tier for this game. On to uncontested best girl and one of the only completely original new characters in this game, Foo Fighters. She was obviously all over this game's marketing, so let's see what she's got for us.
Weather report. 雨を頼む。暗いな。フーファイターズ。ぶち込んでやったぜ。やったぜ。手応え完璧にありだ。
God, that level 1 fucking sucks. And I know that they, didn't have a lot else to give her. She pretty much just shoots plankton at people and uses her plankton abilities for the part. It feels like them loosely trying to include Weather Report in any way that they can, even though they're not actually including him at all. It's super short, doesn't do much, has a ton of counterplay. It's just not very good. The level 3, though, I like a little better. I remember in my video about characters I wanted in this game, I discussed Foo Fighters as one of the potential candidates, and I said I'd like to see a move where she launches plankton inside the enemy to debuff them. And I like that we effectively got that. She launches the plankton right into their mouth and it beats the hell out of them from the inside. It looks good. I can't put Foof any higher than B tier because of how bad her level 1 is, but her level 3 will comfortably land her in B tier. Next up is the most irredeemable piece of shit in the series, Pucci. Let's see what he's got for us. Pucci supers are neat. They're both him removing discs from the opponent, which is something he does a lot in the part. It's probably the most important thing to happen to anyone for most of the part, but they're still both well adapted. The level 1 is just a very simple him swiping the disc and then kicking them away, but it's animated really well. And the level 3, the flourish at the beginning with him doing the whole angel holy pose, and then just the brutal application of the melt your heart ability looks really good. The whole screen melting effect and the transition into what's really happening are really nice. And this level 3 does a shitload of damage. I just noticed that now. This thing hurts. They're not the most interesting they could have given Pucci. Obviously, contextually, I know why. But considering where we came from, I'm left a little wanting by these. Overall, I think they get an A tier. On to the Part 7 characters, who are tied with Part 8 in terms of the needing more characters club. Okay, so I'm just gonna be honest here. Every single one of the 3 original characters from the Part 7 representation in an All-Star Battle, so Johnny, Gyro, and Valentine, are going to get S tier. Their supers are absolutely incredible, perfectly adapted from the manga. It could be because Part 7 had very recently finished when the original All-Star Battle was in development, but they put so much work into these things, gave them so many variations. The voice acting, the effects, the animation on them, it's absolutely beautiful. Johnny's is a great reference to the final fight against Valentine. Gyro's incorporates Ball Breaker brilliantly, especially for a stand that's barely featured in the actual story, and Valentine's is just as beautifully animated and interesting as it is brutal. All 3 of these get an S tier. All 3 of these get... Diego, I'm less in love with. They obviously had less big, huge, substantial emotional moments to adapt with him than they did with the others, so it stands to reason that his would leave a less strong impression, but I'm just not as in love with these as I am the others. The level 1 is the most install super I've ever seen. He literally changes into a different creature with a different body shape and everything, which, you know, makes sense with scary monsters, but it is a big shift for a fighting game character. His level 3's fun. I like how he sends little raptors after them, even if it is clear asset reuse. And the animation of him slashing away at the enemy is cool. The only things I don't really like about these are that we don't get a really scary dinosaur Diego face like we do all the time in the manga, and the actual animation that he does, the combo, is a little plain. It doesn't really feel like as intense as the other Part 7 characters, but he's still gonna get an 8 here. Alrighty, we are on to Josuke 8, who's a character who needed updating in this game more than literally any other. That said, if this is really what we're stuck with, then let's just see what he's got. Okay, so, these are fine. They obviously only adapt the very first few chapters of JoJolion, which is a crying shame considering how much cool stuff came with his abilities later in this part. But if this is what we're stuck with, then I think they're fine as is. They're both very clear-cut references to moments from the manga. I love the extended shot of Josuke talking down to the enemy before Soft and Wet really goes in to let him have it. I like how ramshackle and disorganized Soft and Wet's Aura sounds. It doesn't sound like he's as confident or put together as the other characters, which I think makes sense considering the context. And the shot of the enemy sliding away due to their friction being taken away is funny, even if in actual gameplay they stand up like 2 feet apart from Josuke. Overall, I'll say these get a B tier. And our final character is Bao, and full disclosure, I have not read the Bao manga or watched the OVAs, so I'm going to judge these purely on how they appear in this game. If I say anything that's sacrilegious to Bao fans or flies in the face of what these are supposed to be, I sincerely apologize. I'll make sure to read it and watch it in the future. God, those are cool supers. The level 1 is just a simple big projectile, kind of like what Joseph has with his Tommy gun, but the level 3 is really neat. It's a big combo incorporating a lot of the character's abilities. He picks them up and uses his ability to secrete acid right on their face. He combos them with his blade arms. He picks them up and just chucks them to the ground by their neck, and then he finishes them off with a big electric shock. Once again, as someone who doesn't know anything about the series or really what the extent of this character's abilities are, this is a cool set of animations. I'll say they get an A tier. So this took a lot more out of me than I thought it would. I thought this would be a fun little video I could make on the side while I work on other stuff, but this did end up being my main project for a bit, even with me having to go a week without recording audio for it. So I hope you enjoyed. Hope you have a fantastic day before, during, and after watching, and I'll catch you all later. Thanks and cheers.